Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under. And we are here today to discuss a couple of cup games, some women's football, and the state of Fulham Football Club as it stands at the moment. A lot to talk through. Here to discuss it all, we have Sam. How are we going, Sammy?
Hey, I'm really laggy. I've got a very poor internet connection. I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, it's sometimes it's nice when we take a break, but then it's always just good to come home. You know, it's like coming home to cookies. It's good.
Coming home to cookies. Random, but okay. Dad, how are we going tonight?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Sam, you look like you're being held hostage somewhere.
Well, I'm in my bedroom, and the influencer light is in the other room because, like my charger, Paris realized that she could use it for typing. So if I'm not in the other room and she's working, I'm taking this one because that's what good husbands do. You know, we just share it around.
Okay.
You could easily be in a cave in Afghanistan somewhere with the backdrop you're currently working with. Look, guys, we're here. I'll make mention of it at the start. Actually, this is our 98th episode. We're slowly approaching 100 episodes of That's So Craven. And actually, I believe when we record our 100th episode, Sammy, you will hopefully be over here in Perth, safe and sound. And yeah, just a bit of appreciation at the start of this podcast for everyone who has listened in, followed, liked our posts, just got around the podcast over the last couple of years. We really appreciate it. So please do continue to share the podcast with everyone in your Fulham network. We really appreciate the free marketing. And we really appreciate all the support you guys give us. But guys, there's an awful lot to talk about. Let's crack straight into it. And first thing we're going to talk about today is the semi-final result against Liverpool, 1-1 draw. Disappointing to be knocked out of the Carabao Cup. I think we can be disappointed with the way that we lost these games over the two legs due to the manner of the goals that we conceded, but still a very good effort to make it to the semi-final. Dad, give us your thoughts on this second leg.
Yes, kind of disappointing in the moment, but really on reflection, a very, very good Liverpool team. I think we tried our best, and for the most part, gave them a pretty decent game, really, until a little bit of misfortune and things not exactly going our way. But that's what happens often when you're not the top team. Can I say that? Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Genuinely, sometimes it's nice to have a couple of days between us doing the pod and a result, because if you ask me the day after, I'd probably be a lot more reticent than I am now. But genuinely, I'm just really proud of the guys. I mean, like a draw against Liverpool in any other circumstances is like a massive, massive, massive result. This Liverpool as well is extremely, extremely good. So I can't really be too upset with the result. I mean, it was always going to be a seriously tall order, and I genuinely think the guys made us really, really proud. We didn't close out, but that's okay. That's okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, look, I mean, if we look at the goals we conceded across the two legs, there's the disappointing opener in the first leg where the ball takes a massive deflection. I think it's off Tosin from memory and loops over the top of Bernd Leno. And then in this second leg, it's a really kind of an unexpected error from Bernd Leno, if you call it that. And also from Timothy Castagna as well. To be beaten in the air that easily for a defender is poor. Diaz obviously takes the chance well, but the ball deflects twice off two different defenders. Leno, you'd expect to do better there, gets a hand to it, and it's just not strong enough, goes under. As me and Dad discussed it at length, I guess, and it feels like that deflection just took a bit of pace off the ball and made the ball dip a bit, and so Leno's just misjudged it. But it's considering this Liverpool team are top of the league, probably going to go on and actually win the whole thing based on the way they're playing at the moment. They've still got Salah to come back. This is a serious side, and we've played them at Anfield twice this season. We've lost by 1 goal in both of those games. We've played them at home, drawn 1-1. It's actually, you have to sort of take a step back. It's hard in the moment when Wembley was within reach, but you do have to take a step back and say we've done really well against a really good side here, and we have to take a little bit of pride in that.
Yeah, I actually think that what happened in that moment didn't actually translate very well for TV. I think Leno got done by some aerodynamics that may not have been evident, certainly from the rear view, because it looks uncharacteristically bad. And I'm still struggling to believe that he could misread it so badly. And I don't think he's that kind of a goalkeeper. Just isn't. He's a really great shot stopper with great reflexes. So it's a bit strange, really.
I don't
It
know.
kind of
Maybe
looks like a Sunday league save almost. That's the kind of thing you'd expect a Sunday league keeper to do. Put your hand out and sort of go the right way, but not get far enough and not actually stop the ball. It just didn't, like you said, uncharacteristic. And that's, I guess, why it's a bit gutting, this result, because of that. But look, I mean, we have to, like I said, take a step back and realize we've got to a semi-final of the League Cup. We were this close, and unfortunately, we got definitely the harder draw when you consider we could have been playing Chelsea or could have been playing Middlesbrough. We got the hardest draw here, and we pushed it right to the end. And I think we have to take our hats off and say we put in a really good effort, especially missing 2 key players in Bassi and Iwobi, who I think, I'm not going to say would have made the difference and got us the win in the end, but those 2 add a lot to this team. And I think at the moment with them away at AFCON, we're really starting to understand how important they are to this team and how they actually, for me at least, are such firm starters in this 11. And I can't see a way forward without them both in the starting 11, because there's such a gap without them now.
Totally. As well as Liverpool having a significant amount of depth in comparison to us as well. So, I mean, they've also got players out AFCON as well. But, I mean, just the sheer numbers that they have, I mean, you could probably argue that we were kind of overexerting ourselves playing as many games as we actually did and trying to prioritize. Do we prioritize the league? I mean, we'll talk about it with the FA Cup fixture, how we just had to rejig the squad, and so we probably pushed ourselves up against the wall a little bit, but even still.
Well, you got to go for it, though. You know, it's a semi-final.
Yeah,
and I would actually turn it around and say, rather than kind of lament the result, we should be screaming and cheering for Silva and what he's achieved. You know, given his resources,
With what he's got, 100%.
Very tough.
A really good goal, a well taken goal for Fulham as well. An unlikely source though, Dad. Good finish from Diop there.
Yeah, what was that all about? What was he even doing there? I mean,
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Did he have a visa to be in the 6-yard box? What the hell was he doing? I mean, I'll take it. And great example that's where you've got to be. That's kind of where you got to be for magical things to happen.
It was very shades
funny.
of Bobby Decordova-Reid, just doing whatever he wants and then just getting the goal, and then you're just going, yeah, fair enough. Okay, happy with that.
I mean, it might have been even more funny if it hit him in the back of the head and went in.
That would have been excellent. That would have been excellent.
Well, I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a shame that we couldn't get a better result in this game. But at the end of the day, it's been a really enjoyable cup run. And it often at the start of seasons, I look at the FA Cup and the League Cup and I think, yeah, that's kind of cool, but there's bigger fish to fry every season. And so it's actually been really refreshing and nice this season to look at the League Cup and go, yeah, you know what, let's give it a crack. We're pretty safe in the league. We were in a good position. we've still got Everton and Forest to potentially pick up more point deductions before the end of the season, which gives us this even bigger boost over what will now be the bottom 5, who we're miles ahead of at this stage. And it's been enjoyable having that cup run, and I don't know when the next time we will have a cup run will be, especially as we've been knocked out of the FA Cup. So let's move on to that game and talk about the 2-0 loss to Newcastle. There's a lot going on with this one, not just the result, but everything around the game. But let's just talk about the action itself, because we'll get to that a little bit later. Dad, Fulham put out a slightly weakened team, but still a decent side. And Newcastle also put out a fairly full-strength side. Were you expecting us to both put out full-strength teams, considering there's a game coming up in the next 24 hours or so?
Look, I think if this had been a FA Cup semi-final round, regardless of having played a game 2 days earlier and how knackered people might have been, you'd have to roll the dice and throw everything at it. But it's a difficult-ish fixture fairly early on, and you just have to take that one on the chin, I think, and go, well, that's arrived at a sort of an awkward moment in the schedule, and we just don't have the depth to keep turning up with our very best squad and falling back, to brilliant others on the weekend. So I'm not surprised at what happened. If you were serious about it, my preference would always be put your best team out, try and nick a goal, and then make some changes. But I think Marco has just gone very pragmatic here. The bigger problem we also have is, no disrespect to Mooney's, he tried really hard, didn't have his worst game by an absolute long stretch. But how were we really going to be scoring a hatful of goals against what I thought were a pretty weak Newcastle? Actually, they were poor. They were really poor, and it was a massive opportunity had we had a full strength side.
Newcastle's really approaching Chelsea level for me, of a team that I just hate more and more with each season. They really annoy me. Really, really, really annoy me. They I reckon the last couple of seasons, they've really been a bogey team for us. And the financial takeover is one thing, but I just feel that the way in which we've lost almost every time we've played them. Yes, they're a good side. Yes, they've had some good momentum, but they just seem to neg us in the most irritating way. The politics behind the game as well is just insult to injury as far as I'm concerned. It's just unfortunate timing, and you just kind of further underscores my dislike of them, to be frank.
But that goal, I mean, the first goal, totally against the run of play, I thought they were dreadful, actually, really terrible.
They just sneak it, though. They just always seem to get us, and it's
I mean, on your point there, Dad, I don't know if you remember the commentator saying during the game, he's been watching Newcastle for however many years it was, and this is the worst passing performance by any Newcastle team he's ever watched, including Newcastle teams that have been relegated from the Premier League. And this is a Newcastle team who are, pushing for Champions League spots. They were really poor, and Fulham, I have to say, Fulham seemed to run the game for the majority of the game. We just couldn't do anything with our shots on goal, or even get.
But we were pretty wasteful as well. We turned it over so many times. It was just really pretty ordinary standard, particularly in the first half. It was just really pretty scrappy. But to be fair to Newcastle, they're not a rubbish club or side. They've got a pretty good squad. Not. They've got a lot of injuries. They are going through a miserable and injuries to key players, miserable patch at the moment. So, you got to spare a thought for them trying to muddle through. But it is the kind of thing that, their following fans, God, they, when you give something, not to diss our fans, but God, they're noisy and they're just they sing their hearts out, and there's this interesting dynamic between the players on the pitch and the crowd, and who who moves first, who actually changes it up. Does the crowd lift the players, or does one player do something to lift the crowd? And I have to say that even in the Liverpool match, I thought we were really, really noisy, and obviously you can't feel the full atmosphere because you're not sitting in the stadium. But it, the preparation, all the black and white colours. Actually, there are only two colours. But it was a great carnival atmosphere. And as soon as that goal went in, we went quiet, and that's really tough. That's hard for a team, and it's a bit easy to be a front running set of fans. But I do take my hat off to some of those really big northern clubs who just sing their hearts out and bay for the team to react. And you almost need like a Polinia to just grit his teeth and do something incredible to get the crowd on their feet and try to change the momentum. Craven Cottage is not that good at that. We're not.
Do you know what? Do you know what? Like, I think you actually raise a really good point, because I think we do have the players who can really elevate everything. We have Polinia, Canny, to an extent, Jimenez as well, when he's like really, really firing and he's hot. But like with like places like Anfield and especially Newcastle fans as well, every team kind of has a little bit of an edge to them, or they have these key things. Newcastle's fan base, if there was ever an argument for the 12th man having the ultimate say and being able to turn the match, they're the best example of that. Liverpool at home, I think they can really rock, but I mean, Newcastle fans travel everywhere for them. It's impressive. It's very annoying, but it is impressive.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And there was one moment in the actual latter stages of the Liverpool tie when I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was a rare moment for me to see Willian really scrapping hard for those second balls and diving in, desperate to win the ball, get possession back, and try and mount some sort of challenge. And that's the kind of stuff that obviously that really gets fans going, because they can see the team absolutely desperate. And I'm not saying it's on the players to lift the fans. It's kind of this mutualism where you've got it's almost like you need a couple of key people in the team who are capable of sparking the crowd. And Polini is definitely one of those guys. Those big slide tackles, they're just mental. And they're just so effort-based that you just think this guy's a warrior. He just doesn't give up, and it really inspires people. I mean, how many have we got of those? Maybe Kenny is capable of something like that.
Every week, I have a serious appreciation for your love of work rate players, for lack of a better word. Like they really get Elton going, don't they?
Well, I think they get fans going, don't they? I mean, I appreciate genius skill as well, but I think it's about heart, isn't it? And people really appreciate that, because it's, if you are the underdog and you somehow prevail when you've got no right to against a really skillful team, that's the stuff of heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the goals themselves. The first goal, slightly contentious. VAR didn't overturn it. The ball comes off Gumer's arm, falls to Longstaff, who hits it first time into the bottom corner. Good finish. But look, this handball rule is getting too complex and too complicated for me at the moment. I can't even follow if it is or isn't. I've seen lots of people discussing it and saying a season ago, it would have been, or 2 years ago, it would have been disallowed. And if Longstaff was the person who had accidentally handballed, it would have been disallowed. But because the person who did the accidental handball is not the goal scorer, it's counted as accidental and therefore not a handball, even though it falls directly to their player. And handball is just too confusing now. Do we need to move back to a system where if the ball hits your hand, it's handball no matter what? Unless your hand, I guess, is flush against your body and, you know, is it just too complex now?
No, I think it just lacks common sense. I mean, in the olden days, well, not in the olden days. Forget that I'd even said that, because in the olden days there was no there was no VAR at all, and the ref just saw it, called it, or missed it, and just waved at you and told you to get on with it. But I just, whatever the detail, whatever the most recent change to the handball rule, and I wouldn't even profess to be up with it, but I don't care if Longstaff was the protagonist or not. The ball fell from one of his teammates, accidental or otherwise, into his path. Absolutely teed up. Great finish. Great turn and finish. Really, really. It was onto it like a flash. But if the ball had not hit his arm, and don't talk to me about the same effect if it hit his body, because it did hit his arm, and that's not legal. If the ball hits his arm and falls into Longstaff's path, and that contributes to a goal, in any universe, I just don't see how common sense prevails and says that's a fair goal. Doesn't seem right.
Sammy?
I'm trying really hard. Yeah, I'm trying really hard not to talk about VAR and just it's too easy.
But no, okay, exclude VAR here and just talk.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Do you think we should? The rule should be simplified, and if it hits your hand, no matter the circumstances, it should be a handball.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that. I do agree that I mean the rule is handball, so anything that can factor in handball should count as handball. Very, very simply. It became a bit of a discourse a couple of years ago, and it's the path to hell is laid with good intentions. And now we've created this weird parallel universe where there is handball with intention and handball without intention, and there is a very unnecessary, convoluted way around it when it should just be, did it touch your hand? Yes. So then you just go from there.
Think about Hawkeye, give or take. Hawkeye in cricket has some fallibility, but they seem to have sort of got around that by creating some soft landings for the margin of error. But the offside rule using VAR, brilliant. It's offside or it isn't. It's mathematical. Yeah. And the same could apply to handball. Did it hit someone below the elbow, or whatever you want to include in the hand or arm? And did it hit the body part or not? Doesn't matter if it was accidental. It's not allowed. And so VAR could be really, really good at judging whether the act occurred or not. Not the subjectivity of what was meant or not meant, or was it intentional? That's just an absolute can of worms, and it's always going to be contentious. I don't know why they go there.
Yeah. Look, I don't think we see many intentional handballs now. I think the majority of handballs in football are unintentional.
Yeah.
It's often just arms out to the sides, elbows hanging out stupidly when you're jumping, just because that is how you jump. And look, you can really simply create a couple of rules around it, saying if your hands are on your body and the ball hits your hand, it's not out. Same with not out. Sorry, it's not a handball. Same with if your arm is tucked into your side and you're really trying not to handle the ball and being really careful.
Be careful
And
if you're really trying, because now you're
really,
introducing subjectivity.
No, what I'm saying here is if it's obvious that both of your arms are pulled into your side and you're in what you'd call it's probably an unnatural position because you're actually trying not to have the ball hit your arm, then I think you can say if it hits you on the elbow when your arm is shoved up against your side, that shouldn't be a handball because where else is your elbow meant to go at that point? And so I think you have to, well, you can't expect every defender to now live their life with their arms behind their backs just to avoid the ball potentially hitting their hand. That at that point you're potentially ruining the game. And you're also saying that players could get into the box and just try and flick the ball towards someone's arm when it's against their side, trying to win a penalty all the time. And you have to have some rules in place to allow reasonable handballs, if you will, which is where there's no option to get your hand out the way because your hand is against your body or in a very natural position. So it is hard because there has to be some subjectivity to it.
But isn't it not too different? Isn't it not too different to just diving in the box and then just essentially just making a mockery of the rules that are there in place? It's cheating, but at the same time, it's at least adhering to a very clear set of rules that's been established.
No, it's different because diving in the box is actually cheating. If you accidentally handball something, it's very different to intentionally going over in the box. So I think there's two different things there. For me, just to summarize it, there has to be a change.
This is a double kind of issue because not only was there handball, but the handball actually led to an advantage, which would not have
at
been
which
there.
point it surely has to be overturned, and it baffled me as to why it wasn't. I can understand the reasoning based on the way the rule is currently, and my issue is that the rule is wrong. The ruling should never be that you can accidentally handball into the path of your player and then score a goal. That just it's mind-boggling the fact that is actually a rule in football. But anyway, I think we can all agree that it's a contentious call and one that we're not overly happy with. Fulham go 1-0 down, and look, I think it does change the game at that point. We were dominating, but going 1-0 down when you're playing well just sucked the life out of the game a bit. Dad's second goal, walk us through.
I can't remember the build up to it other than Dan Burn smashing it home and him actually having quite a lot of space to do that.
Yeah, it's a corner. It was poor marking at the back post. Ball gets headed back into the box. Everyone's ball watching. No one picks up Dan Burn, who just has to slot it home, basically. It's a tap in for him, which he, rather than taps in, absolutely smashes into the back of the net, and that was game at that point.
He had an annoyingly good game, Dan Burn.
Yeah, he did. He dominated. It is easy when you're 6'7" or whatever he is, and you're playing against Bobby Decordova-Reid. To be fair, it does make your headers look a little bit more imposing when you have about a foot over your opponent.
God, he's a giant, isn't he?
But look, a really disappointing loss, and we'll talk about some of the off-field stuff at the end of the podcast. I don't want to get too deep into it now because before we do that, I do want to cover the Fulham women's team who were back in action in the league. This is I just saw a really great way of pronouncing this league, which is abbreviated to LandSerWFL, which stands for London and South East Regional Women's Football League, otherwise known as the Laser Waffle.
That's great.
Which I think is one of the best names for a league ever. So
I want shirts of the Laser Waffle.
Fulham currently sitting top of the Laser Waffle after a 3-1 victory against Sutton United. And look, this is the point in the season where we need to be clinical, and we're getting to that stage now, and it's really pleasing to see. Goals from Sasha Adamson in the 13th minute, Georgia Heisman in the 33rd minute, taking it to 2-0 at half-time. Sutton did pull one back in the 64th minute, but Chloe Christensen McNee in the 67th minute made it 3-1, and that's how the game ended. Disappointing, obviously, not to get a clean sheet, but another really solid win from this Fulham women's team, who are just going from strength to strength and now sit on top of the league. Sam and Dad, we've talked about it sort of week in, week out, how important it is to keep up these good results. Sutton, they're sitting quite low down the table at the moment, but Fulham sitting on top with 36 points. We have a 2-point buffer over Dulwich and Dartford, who are both chasing us and have games in hand. How important is it to make sure that we still pick up these wins? And at the moment, look at the league, we're top. Do you think that's going to be playing into Dulwich and Dartford's minds at the moment?
You'd be a brave liar to say it wasn't, because having been on top all season and front running, and then to lose it, it doesn't matter how many games you've got in hand, you've still got to execute and complete those games and win. So there's risk in getting back, and that's pressure. And I think it's a great position that we found ourselves in. And can I just also give a shout out to Dan Crawford for his lovely article that I read on the game. He's very poetic and beautifully written article. I do enjoy reading his coverage of the game, and we should all be very grateful that he puts the time into writing those articles.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look, I think truly great teams have to approach take a Man City, for example. I think they approach games against Burnley the same way that they approach games against Liverpool. Obviously, there is higher jeopardy in one versus the other, but I think you got to go into absolutely every game with the idea that you might potentially lose and that you want to dominate. And I've endless pride for what the girls are doing at the moment. It can almost be tasted. It's genuine. If they do go through, it's genuinely going to be a real moment for me. I'm going to be so proud of them, and they deserve all the admiration and time that we can give them in the world for genuinely just taking this season to a whole nother level. And I think it's been they've had some really good additions to this side, and it just seems to all be flowing so smoothly, and it's a massive credit to them. Every opportunity they've had, I think they've really excelled. They've had one or two not amazing results, but I mean, in the examples that I can think of, it was always going to be a tall order. Yeah, look, it's so close. It's so close to the end of the season now, isn't it? It's almost
from
there.
From what I can gather as well, it wasn't all their own way. I think Sutton United actually came out and gave them, quite a game in the beginning.
Oh, absolutely,
and
yeah.
So it wasn't just a front running 3 goals up and then they scored a consolation goal. It didn't happen like that at all. So it's still competitive, and they're still having to execute their plans. But this is really exciting, and obviously we've got everything crossed in the hope that they can get this over the line and take it down to the last game.
Another big positive for me as well is, like you said, Sutton actually came out and gave a really good account of themselves. And we see that throughout the league, even though there is quite a big gap between the top 3 or 4 sides and the rest of the league. We've seen the teams lower down the division at least put in very good efforts against the top teams. We've seen, just really good results throughout the season, which gives me a bit of hope that come the end of the season, these teams like Sutton, I'm looking at the fixtures now. Sutton played Dulwich on I think it's the second last game of the season for them. And so at the moment, Sutton, yes, they're sitting in 9th place. They are actually trying to avoid relegation as well, which, you can't just take your foot off the pedal completely. we'll actually be hoping that Sutton come out and give that same effort in that game against Dulwich and potentially cause an upset, even if they get a draw out of that game. Every point counts at this stage of the season for Fulham, and I think there's a long way to go, and it's definitely not a foregone conclusion for any of the top three sides chasing that automatic promotion spot. And it is going to come down to the end of the season, and I've just noticed that on the FA website for the Laser Waffle, they've actually included a predictor now. So it allows you to go in and go through all the results, enter scores, and see how the table ends at the end of the season. One thing I will say is that I think all Fulham fans need to also be Saltdean United fans over the next couple of weeks. Saltdean play against Dulwich Hamlet in the league next weekend and Dartford the weekend after. So Saltdean are actually also having a very good season. They're currently sitting fifth in the league. They've only lost 3 games out of their 11 so far. It might look like they're a little further behind us, but they've got 4 games in hand over Fulham and sit 14 points behind us. If they win all 4 of those, they're only 2 points behind us. So they're actually a decent side, and they've got a couple of games
And
that
we
could really sway
lose.
our season at this point.
We'd also have to lose all 4 games for that to
Of course. No. They've got 4 games in hand over us. So they've only played 11. We've played 15. And they sit 14 behind us. So they'd only be 2 points behind us. We're fortunate this weekend. Fulham play. Sorry, the next round of league fixtures is the 11th of February. Fulham play Enfield Town, who are sitting in the relegation zone at the moment with only 2 wins from their 11 games this season. Dulwich and Dartford have to take on Saltdean and Aylesford. Now, Aylesford, you'd expect Dartford would get a good win there and put some pressure back on us at the top of the league. But I really think Saltdean could be a bit of a dark horse here and could really upset the apple cart. If they get a draw against Dulwich, for example, and then the week after they get a draw against Dartford, it really does open up the league a little bit, and we could see Fulham potentially just widen that gap a little bit, or at least when we get to sort of the point where every team is level on games played, it's all to play for. And towards the end of the season, that huge game on the last day of the season, Fulham versus Dartford, I just think that's going to be an absolute ripper, because I genuinely think those teams are going to be within 3 points of each other at the end of the season. And I think that's probably going to be the league decider.
Televise it.
Well, that game
wouldn't it be great to watch it live?
That game takes place on the 7th of April. It's due to be played at Motspur Park. I know there's a lot of chatter out there about potentially getting it moved to Craven Cottage because it would be a massive game, but I think we need to at least get in the club's ear early doors and try and get that game organised to be televised live, because it would be a massive game for the club, where we could hopefully see Fulham finally get promoted after years of trying and years of getting closer and closer. It really does feel like it's our year this year. And look, it's not just down to us covering it in such detail this year, but I'd like to... No, I'm not claiming anything at all.
No, claim it. Claim it. Say it with chest. Say it
not
with chest.
But look, it's a really exciting little time at the moment. The next game for Fulham, though, is actually a League Cup game in the Laser Waffle League Cup. Fulham take on Dulwich Hamlet at Motspur Park this coming weekend, the 4th of February, 2:30 p.m. kickoff. And look, it could be a really good opportunity for us to just put our stamp on Dulwich and sort of say, look, this is the level you have to be to get promoted, and really give them a thumping, hopefully, and maybe leave a couple of bruises behind and leave our mark on them going into the run-in at the end of the season, because there's a lot of games to be played before the final game of the season on the 7th of April. We've even got, February's a short month, and March, between, in that sort of 8-week period, there's about 14 games that need to be played, including some cup games as well. So there's a lot of football to be played, and I'm really hoping that this Fulham women's team keeps kicking on and keeps going from strength to strength and really takes, top spot and makes it our own. Guys, moving on, a big topic to cover here, and it's the Fulham versus the fans, as I've called it here. Look, there's a lot to be said after just everything that's happened in the last few weeks, but it all sort of came to a head during the Newcastle game. Only 18,000 in attendance after ticket prices were put at £40 for adults, £5 for kids. And there's a lot more to this story. And just to give a bit of background, obviously, the ITV coverage before the game, a lot was made, and not just the ITV coverage. It was mentioned, I believe, overseas on the streams as well, and on sort of around the world wherever the game was being covered live. There was mention made of the fact that Fulham fans were protesting against the owners for the fact that ticket prices were outrageous, and loyal fans being priced out of Fulham. We saw the attendance, only 18,000 people there. I believe it's our lowest our lowest attendance against another Premier League side for something ridiculous like 20 odd years. And look, it seemed like it would even be less than that. And it was very noticeable when watching the game that there were big areas of emptiness within Craven Cottage. Post game, the club actually issued a statement which was read out on ITV, stating that they were pleased with the attendance for the game and that they were happy with their pricing and believed that they everything was going fine and everything's fine. It just proves that there's such a huge disconnect at the moment between what the supporters are saying and what the club is actually hearing. And we see it when you look at the minutes of the supporters trust meeting, and you just see that the club just feel like there's nothing wrong at the moment. But the sentiment on Fulham Twitter and everything you see written is just that there's such a communication issue here, and I don't understand how a club can just bury their head in the sand and ignore fans when the fan voice is currently so loud. Dad, I'll throw to you first. What are your thoughts on the whole situation and how the club are handling it?
Well, technically, the club can do whatever they like. The owners of the club and the executive can do whatever they like. They're not bound by a vote on every topic. This is not Switzerland, and so in theory they can do whatever they like, but they are missing a pretty key sort of element in how sporting clubs run, and particularly football clubs in England, and the dynamic that exists. So you can do what you like. They're not answerable to the fans, or they could believe that they're not, but everyone knows that's simply not true. And you sort of you wonder where it will and can end, because I think the fans, as only Fulham fans would be, have been very gentlemanly and very respectful and very passive, very kind of annoyed in a very British way up to this point. And as I said, that they can box themselves in and decide they don't have to listen to anyone, but there will come a point, if the whole fan base actually stands together, there will come a point where there has to be dialogue and there has to be change, because without fans, it's a damaged and much different brand. And you can say what you like, but as a hard-headed businessman who owns an asset called a football club, you do need to be concerned about the brand, and the happiness of the fans is an integral part of all of that.
I'm listening to this audiobook at the moment. It's by a guy called Malcolm Gladwell. It's called Talking with Strangers. He talks a lot about this concept called default to truth theory. In summary, it's that we as human beings will always try to see things as truthful and positive. And if somebody gives us information, we will try to find ways to validate that, because we don't actually want to think of the worst case scenario, meaning it's ill intentions. I genuinely think it is ill intentions. I don't think the club really misunderstands anything. I think they're very aware of it. I think the statement that they put out was potentially a ploy to redirect the narrative ever so slightly, and it's kind of backfired on them. It's saddening. And let's be honest here, we are fans who love our club from across the world, but we're not the ones directly affected by this. It's people in the UK who are having to choose between spending $80 Australian or buying food and like considering things like rent. It's really, really bleak. But the climate is, if you can get away with it and if you can convince people that it isn't a problem, then they're not going to think it's a problem. So it's up to us essentially, and various other people in the Fulham community, as well as social media platforms and just fans in general, should just voice their disconcern and just try to make sure that this narrative isn't the one that sticks, because it so easily could be if we don't make an equal amount of noise. I think it's very concerning, and it shouldn't necessarily be downplayed, because when you allow people to create new narratives, you create lots and lots of issues.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. This issue is not going away. I think it's quite clear now that the club have made their stance clear, and now it's up to the fans and the supporters and the Fulham community to also take as strong a line as the club is taking. The message that the club put out post game in response to a fan protest can only be considered incredibly insulting. There's the one thing to remember here is this protest wasn't organized by the Fulham community, wasn't organized by the supporters trust and by Fulhamish. It was genuinely down to people and season ticket holders and individuals all saying, I can't pay £40 for a ticket to a game, having already had a League Cup semi-final earlier in the week that people wanted to pay money for and paid through the nose for as well. And you can understand when those tickets are expensive. It's against the team that's top of the league to get into a final. So I understand sometimes tickets will be expensive for games. But for the club to just take that hard line and go, no, we're happy with the attendance, we think the prices are reasonable, and just not listen to the majority of the fans who didn't just show it by talking on Twitter and talking about how upset they were and unhappy they were with the situation. They actually spoke with their feet by not attending this game and having huge areas of the stadium completely empty because people are unhappy with it. And it's not organized protest. It's pure protest against the way the club's been running, and it's disillusionment with the way the club's been run.
It might not even be protest, Jack. It might be simply a lack of affordability. Like, I just can't go.
100%, yeah, of course. But in a way, that is a protest.
It's even worse.
You're saying, and I saw it all over Twitter, people just saying, I could pay £40 for it, but I'm not going to, because it's unfair, it's ridiculous. Well, it kind of is a protest. You're not actually taking a hard line and saying, I'm protesting this. They're just saying, I could pay £40 for it.
You're voting with your feet. You're voting with
exactly. It's just ridiculous. And that's the problem here. And the thing I hated the most about the statement was saying, well, kids are £5. That's great. How great that we're offering all these wonderful cheap tickets. It's super reasonable. But how many kids are going to this game completely unattended? If a kid goes to the game, they go with their dad who pays £40 for the ticket. And
it's cynical.
It's just the club just backing themselves into this corner, but they're so confident that they're doing the right thing, and they're so confident that they'll win this game. And I saw someone on Twitter describing it as a game that's being played, and it really does feel like the Fulham board and the Fulham hierarchy are playing a game with the fans, and every move they do is just to try and get a one-up and get a win.
No, I don't think it's a game. I think it's sort of brinkmanship, and just
that is a game.
Doing whatever they can to get it. No, it's money. Whatever they can push it as far as they can until they can't anymore. So, my what I'd like to know is, where does this end? because the Fulham Football Club keep on saying, nope, it's fine. We're happy with the attendance. So you're going to be happy with 10,000 at the
Mm.
next game. Are you going to be happy with 5,000? Are you going to be happy with 2,000? Are you going to be happy with no one in the stands? Is that still okay? I know you've got the season ticket holders' money, but are you going to be happy when everyone says no? So at what point do they concede that we're not happy with that? Actually, that's not a good outcome. Because
I know
whatever
you
the
are
answer
talking
is to
about an
that,
organised protest.
no, yeah, but we're talking about how do we get to the point where it's not that they're not listening; they're actually saying, yes, we are listening, but we're perfectly happy with the situation. We have the right to have our revenue objectives, and we think that's a fair price. And if only 18,000 people turn up, that's fine. So, at what point is it not fine? Because when it's not fine, they might consider changing the strategy, and
Yeah.
that might give you an insight as to where we go next.
It's always going to be between a rock and a hard place for me, just because as a fan, we will always be prone to engage, and they will, as in the club, I mean, will always be very, very conscious of that. So they will keep on projecting this idea that it's fine and you will come anyway. And you know what? We will, because that's just what you do when you love your club and you invest. Yeah, it's not for me to say. I don't have any concrete ideas, and honestly, it shouldn't necessarily ever be coming from me at any point. But as long as the conversation keeps circulating and keeps being discussed, at this stage, I think that's all we can really do before cooler and smarter heads figure out a solution. I don't think the solution is going to come from the club, though.
It's interesting you say that we will continue to come no matter what. The actual issue here is the Fulham board in what they're doing don't care if we come, if Fulham fans who love the club come or not. They just want bums on seats. And because we're a Premier League club in London, they will get bums on seats no matter what. I don't think we'll ever get to the stage where there's only 10,000 people in the stadium, because
Mm.
these seats will get sold to tourists. And that's
Yeah.
effectively what Fulham are banking on, is that you can price them at a point that is desirable for tourists. Tourists will come and pay that price for those tickets. And it doesn't matter who's watching the game as long as the money comes into the coffers at the end of the day. And that's one of many big issues here,
Mm.
is that the club just don't care. They don't care where money comes from. They don't care how the fans feel. And they've proven that time and time again with the statements that they make and how they talk to the supporters trust and how they engage with the fans. And we saw it last night. We're recording this on Monday, the 29th of January. And last night there was uproar on Fulham Twitter when what seemed like a bit of a burner account from possibly someone high up at the club just decided to go on an absolute rampage and start throwing people under the bus, threatening, members of the Fulham community who are very well known and well respected, and saying that it's all their fault that the club is going down the toilet, and if the club gets relegated, it's all on Mr. Noise and Fulhamish and MJG and all those blokes who are actually the lifeblood of the Fulham community. It's those people who Fulham fans want to talk to and want to listen to and engage with. At the moment, the club, they're just getting it so wrong time and time again. And you kind of have to look at it and go, when is enough enough? It feels like we're approaching that point now.
I think it is worth noting that they're going about everything the wrong way if they want to retain their current fan base. But and I do want to slightly revise what I said before, because you are absolutely right, Jack. We won't come, but other people will. So it will always be filled. No, it won't necessarily always be filled, but there will always be people that will come to Craven Cottage. And the fear that I have is that if the Khans and Fulham as a whole can alienate their current fan base in favor of a more profitable one that they can actually benefit and will work within the model that they want to go by, financially speaking, that is what they will pursue.
Yeah, I'm just not buying that the fan base of Fulham, the loyal fan base, the true loyal fan base of Fulham, will actually suffer that. I just don't buy it. Good
Of
luck
course.
playing that game. Good luck playing that game, executives and owners. But you might get away with it in the short term. But I will enjoy being part of that movement that absolutely kneecaps that as a plan.
Vive la
And
France!
I think what you're sort of saying there as well is, and I think this is the direction we're going, is the fact that, you know, it's hard to get a big group of people together to get behind a cause. We saw it with the showing of yellow cards. People were, you know, everyone did it in the stadium, and it was a great show, but there were still people grumbling about it and whinging about it. And I just feel like the longer this goes on and the more that the Fulham hierarchy put their foot in it and continue to make these decisions that baffle the fans, the more this whole Fulham community is going to come together against them as well. And you're just constantly drumming up support by doing the wrong thing. And we're starting to see it now that everyone is just slowly coming together. And we talk about, you know, what if everyone walked out of the game? And it's really hard to control things like that. And we constantly talk about, what if we do this? What if we do that? And one of the biggest issues is the pure logistics of getting 28,000 people inside a stadium to all do the same thing. But because of the way that Ali Mack and the Khans are acting and the hierarchy of the club are acting, they're actually doing it for us. They're doing the job of pulling people together and pulling people against the club because people love the club so much. And I think you're right in saying that you're just never going to win in the long run. Like, the only way to win is to basically bankrupt the club. And I don't think the Khans are going to do that, because I think they're savvy business people who aren't going to run the club into the ground financially, because they see it, they kind of see it as an asset, and they're not going to destroy their wealth just to be right. I don't think that's the case here. But something has to snap at some point, and it really feels like we've talked about this quite a few times through the season. It's always felt like, yeah, something will happen at some point, but it's building now. It's really building within the Fulham community, and I feel like we're on the edge of something happening, and it's going to be big when it does, because I think the message to the club has to be big. It has to be bold. We've shown yellow cards at the stadium. The club said it's not helpful to protest. We had 10,000 people not buy tickets to the game.
It's such a great statement.
It's really uncomfortable.
Can you please not do that?
We had 10,000 people not attend the Newcastle game, and the club said, yeah, we're actually quite happy with the attendance.
Yeah.
You have to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because the club just refuses to take notice. And I wonder what comes next. And Sammy, as you said, it's not for us to decide what comes next, but I think there's a lot of people out there in the Fulham community
Elton
who
disagrees.
can decide what comes next.
No. Part of the problem is that you're absolutely right, Jack. You know, getting everyone to coalesce around even the best of causes is very difficult. It just is, because human beings, if they're not lazy and always looking for someone else to do the heavy lifting, they're just individuals, and they're doing just fine. There'd be plenty of people sitting in the Riverside stand and going, "What are you whingers on about?" You know, plenty of money, and just quite happy with the status quo. So, and even the whole concept of actually getting money off people up front for season tickets is kind of a slam dunk, because you got their money and you can whinge as much as you like, and you can not come if you like, but I've got your money. So it's sort of a difficult one for someone who's already shelled out very significant pounds for a season ticket to ask them to not turn up at a league game that they've prepaid for. It's a big ask, and it's just unlikely to happen en masse, unless this boils to a point where people just say enough, no more. You know, go and ask. Look at Ukraine. They didn't like what Russia did.
Well,
Wasn't hard.
I think
Wasn't hard to get them out in the streets, was it?
Well, I think one thing that is pretty definitive is there is a clear out and out bad guy and there's a clear out and out good guy, and that sounds very, very basic in principle, but it's actually important because when there is a clear oppressor in a situation, it makes the conversation a lot less nuanced. I think one of the worst things that the Fulham fan base could do at the moment is more or less make excuses or find reason behind the Khan's justification. I think one thing that's probably very important that the Fulham fan base has to do is just remain united, because as the issue gets bigger, the more diverse and the more conversation around it and the more nuance, it'll literally just become a handball, won't it? Because you'll have and then because you'll have people who feel very, very strongly, people who are kind of in the middle, and people who are ambivalent. At worst case, they're directly benefiting from it. I don't know. But as long as that middle core of people all believe the same thing and are in cahoots, and that just grows bigger, and we stay, I'll get preachy, stay loving to each other and supportive of one another. Because as I said, this isn't directly affecting us, but it's affecting other people. And if you're a Fulham fan, I love you. Like, share, and subscribe. But it's just important that
you're right.
we all remain.
You're right. You're right, Sam. And people literally have to dig in for the long haul and be prepared, because they're toughing it out on the other side. They're going, Ali Mack's earning a very nice salary, and he's not being affected by this at all. He's just doing his job, doing as he's told, and he's quite happy to just tough this one out. And Fulham fans as a collective ought to be prepared to do the same thing. If this doesn't work, let's try this. If that doesn't work, let's try this. And obviously, as I think everyone should be in full agreement, the Fulham Supporters Trust is the channel to do that, because they represent the a way of actually projecting a united voice, and that's the smartest way of doing it, rather than everyone jumping up and down a bit like I am, sort of rah 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 and making a noise. No one cares, but so we have to stay organized, really, is I guess what we're saying.
And also as well to just put a nice little bow on my point. The point where the ambivalent casual fan really, really gives a shit, that's when you actually have something. I think at the moment we're at a stage where it's really, really hurting some people, and some people aren't necessarily aware, and it's not directly affecting them. If you can get those people to care and it becomes homogenous, I think then you were actually at a point where we can action some change.
Yeah, I think all really good points, and it's something that we can't let slip now. I think that's the biggest point here, is that as a Fulham podcast and as a Fulham community, we really need to continue to fight the good fight, if you will, to continue to just put pressure on the club to do the right thing. Because at the end of the day, football is for the fans. Like, I know it's a business, but football was kind of created for enjoyment. It's a pastime. It's something that should be enjoyed by everyone, and people shouldn't be priced out of football. No. People shouldn't have to potentially not have dinner that night so that they can go to a football game. And that's where we're getting to at the moment. And we have to remember it's a game for everyone. It shouldn't just be for the super rich and the elite. It should be accessible to everyone. Great for £5 kids tickets, but where were the £10 adults tickets if you're bringing a kid, for example? Why are we pricing people out of the game who just want to support the team that they love? You see season ticket holders who've had season tickets for 60 years and can't afford to continue to go to watch their team. And, speaking kind of drastically, it leads to things like depression, and it's a serious issue that they're kind of dealing with. And this is often the joy in people's lives, being able to support your club. I know it brings me personally a lot of joy being able to support the club. And if I was living in London, I'd be trying to get to every single game. And if it got to the point where I just couldn't afford to go to games because of my situation, it would kill me inside. Like if I thought to myself, I can either provide for my family or go and watch Fulham play, you're making me toss up between two joys in my life, and I have to pick just one. It's unfair on everyone involved. It's just unfair on Fulham fans who have stuck with this club through thick and thin. That you remember the dark years of the early years of the Khans. You look back even further than that to the very dark times when we were sitting at the bottom of League Two and struggling to survive. And it's fans that make a football club. At the end of the day, it's not the chairman, it's not the CEO. It's the fans that make the club, and the fans are the people who need to be listened to in this instance. It's terrible at the moment, and it needs to change.
I thought it was a kind of a given that every football owner is reminded as they step through the door and cross the threshold, is reminded by the previous owner that they are merely custodians for a period of time to actually look after the club and then hand it on in a better shape. It's kind of quickly forgotten, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest, we're being pragmatic. It's a business. People pay big money for the ownership of clubs, and they have every right to make a profit out of it. I've got no problem with that. But it's a bit like if you want to get into hospitality, there are certain kind of rules of the game. If you're in retail, certain kind of, if you want to be in healthcare, you got to have some ethics. If you want to be in football, you can't ignore the dynamic and the constituent of the fan base. You can if you like, but it won't work. It's not how it goes.
Just to follow on your point, Dad. And I don't think you're wrong, but I do think it requires a little bit more to it, because I think, yes, it is a business in name, but football. I mean, you see this all the time. Football is something that runs so deeply. It's I mean, we found a pretty perverse way that we've been able to finance people's emotions. Essentially, it's one of the purest ways in which we do that. Music is another example of that as well. But one of the darkest things you could probably argue that ever happened to football was bringing in an economic side to it, because what you're actually doing here is, you're right. These people don't really own the clubs. They're holding the clubs and they're profiting in that period, but the club will always belong to the fans emotionally. And while somebody is holding that, you're essentially holding millions of people's emotions, or thousands of people. We're still a relatively small club. And you look at the care that's handled. I mean, Liverpool's an amazing example with Jurgen Klopp, and the way that whole club has been handled in the past couple of years with such care and such attention to detail and compassion for its fans, and such a beautiful understanding of what that club actually is. It just makes it all the more yucky when you compare it to what's happening with our club. Because, yeah, you're right, it's a business, but I would argue that it's equal amounts love as it is a business.
Yeah. No, I think we've all made good points on this one, and it's tiring. It really is, and that's why it's so important to continue to actually keep up the fight and keep pushing against the club when it comes to situations like this, because that's the only way that you get the outcome that we're looking for, which is affordable Fulham and to kind of have our club back again. Guys, I think we can probably wrap it up there. We've talked about a lot of things today, and we've covered off some pretty heavy topics. Big shout out to Twitter account Jay Williams as well. It's a shame he's disappeared, but it was fun while it lasted. Thank you to everyone who's been listening along, been joining in. We apologize again for being a little sporadic with our podcasting recently, but we do really appreciate everyone who continues to listen and continues to share all of our content. We'll continue to podcast, and we're really looking forward to our 100th episode in the next couple of weeks. So, Sammy, thank you for your time tonight. It's an earlier one for you tonight.
It is. I will be able to do a couple of other things with my evening, which I'm very happy to say. I'm not closing up shop at about 1:30 in the morning, which is wonderful. Again, just another round of appreciation for all the fans that we have, and just Fulham fans in general. I mean, it sounds obvious, but the amount that we appreciate you guys is crazy. Always keep liking and sharing us and doing all that stuff, because it does make a difference. And the bigger the voice that we have, the more we can talk about things like this. And if I do say myself, I think we actually cover it quite nicely and earnestly and good. It's nice. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sam. And Dad, thank you for joining tonight.
Yeah, I was just trying to. I don't think I can better that from a modesty perspective.
Better bit.
No, it was. I enjoyed that chat. It's important, not just to get up on a soapbox, but I think we do genuinely care about it. And I know there are so many different kind of groups of people here. Obviously, all the overseas fans sit where we do, love the club, not directly affected by the pricing of. Not directly affected by pricing, that is. And I think the other thing that we haven't really touched on here is, spare a thought for Marco and the team and the players, who it must be pretty crap playing under these circumstances, knowing that we so often talk about the strength of the 12th man for some of these very, very big clubs, and us on a good day. And to know that there's beef between the stands and the establishment of the club catches the manager and the team somewhere in the middle. And that's unfortunate, but it must be a bit of a crap dynamic for them. You can see how much players love being part of a positive, great atmosphere in a club when things are going well and they're being really supported by the fans. They're so appreciative of it. So it's just a really difficult situation, and one that we're not advocating any kind of situation where the team suffers in any way, because God forbid they don't get supported by the owner sufficiently in the transfer market. So why should the fans beat them up as well? That seems deeply unfair. But anyway, watch this space. I had a good idea, but I'm not going to talk about it here.
The longest goodbye ever.
I specialize in them.
Rightio. Well, thank you again, guys. What I'll do as well, I'll post a little link to the laser waffle predictor. I've just gone through it while you're doing that outro, and Fulham win the laser waffle by 4 points. So congratulations, Fulham women. I've predicted you to win the league already. So,
so you were literally getting me to tap dads while you were doing that.
Well, not far off, yeah. Thank you again to everyone who's listened in. Thank you as always, and come on, you Whites.